When my husband found out that I couldn't inherit my father's inheritance, he started to scream.
What? You can't inherit any of his assets? If so, I have no use for you anymore. I want a divorce right now.
After that, I got my revenge on my husband and my sister, who got married to each other immediately. My name is Chloe, a 32-year-old office worker, and I've been married to my husband George for 2 years. I met George through a relative, and we got married. My family was somewhat wealthy, but since we were the only daughters, my relatives, worried about who would take over, introduced me to George, saying it would be okay for him to be married into our family. My husband who married me never married into the family, but he began living with me at my parents' home. My mother passed away a few years ago, and the three of us, my father, my husband, and I, live in my parents' house. My husband is very kind and treats my father well, so he seemed like a very good person. But a relative who introduced him to me told me something worrisome right before our marriage. I know it's strange for me to say this since I was the one who introduced George to you, but he's kind of obsessed with money, so be careful. I had already tied the knot with him and was about to have a wedding ceremony, so it was too late for me to do anything about it. But I hadn't noticed any money obsession from my husband, so I went ahead with the marriage. Even after getting married, I kept a close eye on my husband because of what I heard. But I didn't sense any obsession with money from him. However, he seemed to be curious about my father's assets, and he would casually ask about them when he was having a drink with my father. My father was open about it, so I didn't worry too much. Another thing my husband was curious about was my younger sister. My sister is 5 years younger than me, and unlike me, who is calm, she is lively and outgoing, with a vibrant social life with men. She doesn't look like me, and my husband was surprised when he first saw her.
Your sister has a completely different vibe from you, Chloe, doesn't she?
Seeing my husband, who was fascinated by my beautiful sister with her distinctive features, in stark contrast to my plain and boring self, gave me mixed feelings. However, the relative who introduced me was worried that if I, who's modest and plain-looking, couldn't get married, there would be no one to inherit after my family. I thought there was no need to worry because I had a beautiful sister, but I later realized why that relative was worried. My father was very lenient with my sister, allowing her to go to college after high school, and even to a vocational school after she graduated from college. It wasn't that my sister had a particular goal in mind when she went to college or to the vocational school. She just didn't want to work. On the contrary, my mother was strict with my sister, insisting she should get a job as soon as she graduated from college. But my father overruled my mother, allowing her to go to a vocational school. After graduating from the vocational school, my sister got a job at a company that a friend of my father's owned, but she quit after just 6 months. I was taken aback by my sister's excuse when she quit her job. I couldn't show my full potential at that company. My mother and I were baffled that she was talking as if she had already mastered all aspects of her job, despite only working for half a year. But my father seemed to believe my sister's story, and promptly arranged for her to start working at a different company. After a while at this new company, our mother got ill and had to be hospitalized. Once our mother was in the hospital, my sister was there every day, often skipping work. Eventually, she quit that job too, and started saying that she would take care of our mother. However, her version of caring was just being in the same room as our mother, chatting or spending most of her time staring at her smartphone in the waiting room. I was the one who had to pick up our mother's laundry from the hospital and replace it with fresh clothes while my sister wasn't being helpful at all. It's possible that our mother enjoyed having my sister there to talk to, but after about a month in the hospital, her condition worsened to the point that she couldn't even have a conversation. Within 2 weeks of her condition worsening, our mother passed away. My father and sister were in such a state of shock that they couldn't even arrange for a funeral, so I had to do it. Fortunately, our relatives were very helpful, and we were able to give our mother a proper send-off. After our mother's death, my sister started working part-time and moved out of my parents' house to live on her own. She couldn't pay her rent with just her part-time earnings, so our father started covering her rent and utility bills. It seemed like she was spending all the money she earned on her own for fun. Whenever her part-time income wasn't enough, she'd come to our father for money. Back when our mother was alive, she was strict with my sister, so even after my sister started working, our father didn't give her an allowance, but now he lets her have as much as she wants. I figured if both our father and sister were happy with the arrangement, there was no problem. Even after I got married and started living with my husband at my parents' house, my father continued to give my sister an allowance. At the time, I didn't notice, but it seems my sister was also asking my husband for money, and he was willingly giving it to her. He apparently couldn't say no to my beautiful sister and told her to keep it a secret from me, saying,
"Don't tell Chloe about this, okay? She might get jealous."
My sister used to do part-time work when she felt like it and was living on the money she received from our father and my husband. But such a lifestyle of hers couldn't last forever. It's because our father got ill and had to be hospitalized. I was visiting the hospital in between my work and taking care of our father, but my sister never even showed her face at the hospital. Instead, she started to call me and demand money. "Since I've been getting money from Dad every month, I need you to continue that. The rent and public utility bills are all being deducted from Dad's account after all." She spoke to me in an angry tone, and I was surprised by this fact that I heard for the first time. I got angry at my sister who, instead of worrying about our hospitalized father, was only concerned about her own life. Although I really wanted to hang up the phone, it seemed like my sister was also in trouble. So I asked her how much money our father was giving her every month. "How much are you getting from Dad every month? You need to get a job soon and start living on your own earnings." My sister responded in a grumpy tone. "Don't be so annoying. I was getting $1,000 every month. That's excluding the rent, by the way." I was stunned at my sister, who proudly stated the amount. I thought that if an adult like my sister was receiving so much money every month, she would lose any motivation to work seriously. I thought that our father would get better soon after being hospitalized, so I didn't think it was a big problem to give money to my sister. However, our father's condition suddenly worsened, and I quickly contacted our relatives. The doctor also told me that he was in a serious condition, and I was deeply shocked. I wanted to be supported by my husband at such a time, but he said he was busy with work and seldom came by the hospital. Moreover, even when my husband did come to the hospital, he would ask me insensitive questions like,
"Your father's inheritance must be huge, right? Since the only heirs are you two sisters, you're going to split it in half, right?"
I had no words to respond to my husband, who was only talking about the inheritance. At the same time as realizing that this is what my relatives meant, when they said my husband was obsessed with money, I also felt a sense of disgust. Even when I got a call from my sister and explained that our father was in a critical condition, she was only concerned about her own money. "Forget about that. Just make sure you pay me every month. Without that money, I can't live." The call ended right there. I was furious with what my sister said, but I was also concerned about the faint male voice I heard on the other side of the phone. I recognized that voice and had a bad feeling about it. About a month later, our father passed away, but neither my sister nor my husband were there at his last moment. Having experienced my mother's funeral, I realized that preparing for a funeral was a heavy task. To make matters worse, neither my husband nor my sister did anything to help. My sister didn't even attend the funeral. My husband showed up at the funeral, but as soon as it was over, he disappeared, saying he had work. Even the relative who introduced my husband to me noticed his absence and asked me about it. "What happened to your husband? It's strange for your husband to be absent, isn't it?" All I could do was give a bitter smile in response. "It seems he's busy with work. He had to go home." Hearing my explanation, the relative sighed, but I was the one who also wanted to sigh. After my father's funeral was over and I was finally able to catch my breath, my husband came to me with a grin on his face.
"Finally, huh? How much did you inherit? Even if we split it in half, you're going to inherit quite a bit, right?"
As warned by my relative, before we got married, it seemed that my husband's mind was full of thoughts about my father's inheritance. Disappointed in my husband, I responded nonchalantly. "My sister gets $100 million and I get 0. I hadn't yet discussed anything with my lawyer, and with the funeral just over, I hadn't even sorted out my feelings yet. Looking at my husband talking about the inheritance so happily, I felt like laughing out loud, beyond anger. My husband, believing my words, immediately began shouting.
"What? You can't inherit any of his assets? If so, I have no use for you anymore. Let's get a divorce right now."
Since I felt the same way, I replied back, "Let's do that. You married me for my father's inheritance in the first place, didn't you? I'll divorce you." As I shouted this, I thrust the divorce papers I had prepared at my husband. My husband seemed a little flustered as I brought out the divorce papers, as if I had anticipated this, but he signed them anyway. As my husband, who had signed the divorce papers, said this before he left.
"I'll divorce you, who has no inheritance, and remarry your sister Emily to get the $100 million.
Regardless, I immediately submitted the divorce papers. I was able to break up with my scumbag husband. My ex-husband seemed to have submitted the marriage certificate with my sister the next day. A few days later, I got a call from my ex-husband. Still believing that story, he yelled,
"When are you going to start the inheritance procedures? Give Emily the $100 million as soon as possible."
I was actually waiting for a call from my ex-husband. I didn't want to be the one to contact my ex-husband who left the house on his own. I answered my ex-husband in a businesslike tone. "Let's discuss it at my place this Sunday. I'll be ready for the process." My ex-husband, thinking he would receive the inheritance, was overjoyed and hung up the phone. But I was looking forward to seeing his face when he learned the actual truth. Over the weekend, my ex-husband and my sister came to my parents' house, and they were surprised that I had called a lawyer. However, my ex-husband spoke as if he was satisfied.
I knew it. You need a lawyer when you inherit a fortune.
Then the lawyer spoke to my ex-husband with a puzzled look.
There's the matter of inheritance, but before that, there's a matter of property of division claimed by your ex-wife against you.
And he began to show my ex-husband a few photos. They were photos of my ex-husband coming out of my sister's house with a date clearly written on it. The lawyer spoke to my ex-husband.
These are photos of evidence of your affair before the divorce was finalized. You will have to abide by the property of division.
I had heard my ex-husband talking about the inheritance over the phone with my sister, and immediately asked my lawyer to investigate about my husband's infidelity. Perhaps because they thought I was distracted by my father's funeral, my ex-husband and sister were meeting at my sister's house almost every day, which allowed me to obtain a lot of evidence. Both my ex-husband and sister were stunned when the topic switched from inheritance to their infidelity. But my ex-husband quickly regained his composure and argued back.
Property division is a small thing compared to the $100 million inheritance. I'll pay it off right away.
When the lawyer presented the documents in front of my ex-husband, who was speaking arrogantly, he signed it easily. After confirming that, I told my ex-husband, "Enjoy your life with my sister, who inherited nothing. Since you signed, I'll make sure to collect the property division." The moment she heard that she inherited nothing, my sister screamed. "What? Why is my inheritance 0? I'm supposed to get $100 million. My ex-husband also turned red and started yelling.
There's no way there's no inheritance, right? I won't let you take it all by yourself.
The lawyer calmly started to explain to the two of them, who were angry.
Emily is actually her late mother's child from her previous relationship, and she was not officially adopted by Chloe's late father. So there is no legal parent-child relationship between Chloe's father and Emily. Therefore, Emily, you cannot inherit your father's estate.
I also explained to my sister, who seemed confused. When our parents remarried, Emily, you were about 1 year old. So I don't think you remember, but I remember it clearly. When our parents remarried, I was 6 years old, and I clearly remember how happy I was to suddenly have a sister. I never expected such a sister would steal my husband. Our father and mother, both burdened with young children, seemed to think it was best to balance out well between the children when they remarried and started parenting. My mother loved me as if I were her own daughter, and my father treasured my sister. Maybe my father spoiled my sister more because she wasn't his biological daughter, and he was overly cautious. Though both of them remarried with children, my mother, who was suspected by relatives of being interested in my father's assets, refused to adopt my sister. The relatives who kept recommending me for marriage did so because they knew that I was the only one who could inherit my father's wealth. If there had been a child between my father and my mother, things might have gotten even more complicated, but fortunately or unfortunately, they had no children. Perhaps they didn't have children in order to avoid disputes over inheritance in the future. Now I understand that since he couldn't leave his inheritance to my sister, my father had been financially supporting her even after she became an adult. Just like my sister, I wasn't officially adopted by my mother. So legally, we weren't parent and child, but we never cared about that ever. It seems that our parents hadn't told my sister that they were both actually remarried, and today was the first time she learned the truth. I wonder if my ex-husband understood the situation immediately, his face turning from red to pale. In addition to not getting the inheritance he was expecting from my sister, he was also being asked for property division, and he had already signed the documents. With a pale face, my ex-husband asked me,
Was the $100 million for my sister and 0 for me, you said, a lie?
Suppressing my laughter, I answered, Of course it's a lie. It was to get back at you for having an affair behind my back. And there's no way my father's inheritance was $100 million. My father, although he was wealthy, didn't have an inheritance of $100 million. Suddenly, my quiet sister screamed, I've done quite a lot of shopping, expecting that I would get Dad's inheritance. What's going to happen to the money that Dad had been paying until now? Will you pay for me, sis? Since you're married and have a reliable husband, you don't need it anymore, right? Have George support you. My sister was looking at my ex-husband, who was pale, but my ex-husband shook his head.
I can't afford that. I also bought a lot of things expecting the inheritance, and now there's property division, so I'm at my limit.
After saying that, my husband suddenly got on his knees before me and started to apologize.
Chloe, I'm sorry, it was my fault. I apologize, so can we get back together?
The lawyer, who had been packing up to go home, laughed at the scene. Where did the arrogant attitude he had when he arrived at the house go to? George pleading on his knees like that was completely ridiculous. After the discussion, my ex-husband and sister left depressingly and seemed to have divorced soon after. For my ex-husband, who remarried with the intention of inheriting my sister's inheritance, he seems to have lost interest in my sister, who didn't receive any inheritance. As he was saying, there's going to be property division and he can't take care of my sister. But since my ex-husband has no property whatsoever, I decided to have him pay for it from his monthly salary. My lawyer advised me that this way I wouldn't miss out on receiving it. My sister, who lost my father, who had been supporting her, seemed to be working part-time every day out of necessity, but it seems that she couldn't afford to pay off her debts and ended up filing for bankruptcy. After that, she moved out of the apartment where she lived, and I don't know where she went. My father was financially supporting my sister, thinking of her, but because of him spoiling her, my sister became unable to work in a serious way. Later, my relatives started talking about introducing me to a marriage partner as I began living alone in my parents' house, but I refused. I wouldn't want to be introduced to a man like my ex-husband again. So this time, I want to find a marriage partner by myself. My name is Rose. I'm 34 years old, and I live with my husband, Mark. We both work at the company that my father-in-law founded. My father-in-law has already retired, but he built up a small construction company into a business with annual sales of $173 million. It seems that he played hardball, like acquiring rival construction companies, but everyone praises his business skills. My husband, who was to follow in his father's steps, had a pampered upbringing as their only son and has a gentle character that doesn't seem to really apply in this harsh, cold world. Although being gentle sounds nice, in reality, he is an indecisive person who can't make decisions about anything, and I started to feel that he was unsuitable as both a husband and a company manager. Even my husband would say things like,
I'm not cut out to be a manager, so even if I become the CEO, I'll probably just only look like a CEO. That's easier for me.
Showing that he wasn't seriously thinking about taking over the company. We've been married for 5 years now, but recently I've been particularly dissatisfied with my husband's lack of initiative. In contrast to my husband, I consider myself a decisive person, and when my father-in-law was active, he seemed to like that about me and gave me various jobs. Before I got married, I used to work at a bank, so I always work while paying attention to the numbers. I quit the bank when I got married, intending to become a full-time housewife, but my father-in-law asked me to work at the construction company, so I decided to do that. Shortly after I started working, my father-in-law started inviting me to meetings, where board members would participate and asked for my opinions about management. At first, the directors seemed to question why the founder's daughter-in-law was invited to important meetings, but as I gave appropriate opinions, they started to listen to me. My husband was also a director, but he didn't participate in the meetings, and both the directors and my father-in-law seemed to think that was normal at this point. After the meetings, when I returned home, my husband would be watching TV with a carefree look on his face. "Why didn't you attend today's meeting? You're an important director. You need to be aware of that." As I spoke angrily, my husband argued, thinking that he did nothing wrong.
Even if I attend, I don't understand the content of the discussions well, and the directors like you better, so there's no problem, right?
I wonder if he doesn't like me participating in the board meetings because he said such things like that. My father-in-law has been teaching me about running the company in detail, and it seems like he wants me to be his successor. At first, I was also new to the management, but I started to enjoy the work. Before I knew it, I was working hard to live up to my father-in-law's expectations. About 2 years after I started attending meetings, my father-in-law fully retired. The directors also started consulting me when they needed to make important decisions, and my husband was being ignored. I thought that if such a situation like this happened, my husband would regret and devote himself more to his work. But on the contrary, he became less dedicated than ever before. He would go to work in the morning, but he would go out somewhere before noon and then return home. Even when he saw me at home, he wouldn't talk about work, and it seemed he didn't care about the company at all. On the other hand, I was getting busier as my work at the company increased. After my father-in-law retired, the executives started relying more on me, and I was assigned tasks more like a CEO. It's a big company with many employees, and for the sake of those employees, I was doing my best to increase the company's sales and profits. With the efforts of the employees, sales began to increase, and I became more interested in managing the company and became absorbed in my work. On the other hand, my husband seemed to lose interest in work, and he began to show up at the company less and less. The conversations between us at home decreased, and our relationship became strained. And during that time, my husband came home and began to say this:
"I ran into Maria today and we had lunch together."
He casually mentioned this. My sister is 2 years older than me, and she had just divorced half a year ago. The cause of the divorce was my sister's affair, and it caused a big commotion when my sister's angry husband stormed into our parents' house. My husband went to my parents' house to calm my sister's husband, as I was busy at work. Having a pampered upbringing and being gentle, my husband persuaded my sister's husband, who reluctantly left at that time, and my sister later said, "The company's CEO is really amazing." He led my husband back home, who was really enraged. She was praising my husband. My husband, with his calm attitude and laid-back way of speaking, probably managed to defuse my sister's angry husband. My sister was able to divorce her husband after paying alimony, but it seemed that her view of my husband changed after this incident. Until then, she seemed to consider my husband who was not particularly good-looking and indecisive, as nothing more than a rich guy. But she seemed to have convinced herself that he was a reputable company executive. My sister also became single after her divorce, and she always loved rich people. So to her, my husband must have seemed like a good catch. But I, who was absorbed in my work, never imagined such a thing would happen. And of course, my sister would not know that my husband is just a director and is not involved in the management of the company. My sister's divorced husband was an elite employee at a foreign company, and she was bragging to me at their wedding. My husband is an excellent employee, so his salary is high and he's handsome. So you must be jealous. Indeed, my sister's ex-husband was good-looking and sharp-minded, and he always gave off a stylish vibe when he was talking. I couldn't understand why my sister, who had such a wonderful husband, would have an affair. 3 months had passed since my husband told me he had dinner with my sister.
Rose, I need to talk to you.
Hearing those words from my husband for the first time gave me a bad feeling. As I nervously waited for him to speak,
Actually, your sister is pregnant with my child, so I want a divorce.
I was shocked at the divorce request, but even more surprised to learn that my sister was pregnant. As I was left speechless, my husband continued.
On my next day off, your sister is going to come here and have a discussion, so please, cooperate.
Bewildered by his request, I asked my husband, "So, you want to marry my sister?" Seeing the troubled look on my husband's face,
I don't necessarily want to get married, but if a child is involved, there's no choice.
Frustrated with my indecisive husband, I answered with a sigh. Well, if there's a child involved, there's no choice. Let's talk about the future when my sister comes. Knowing that I wouldn't be able to decide anything by talking to my husband, I decided to meet my sister directly. Although I was thinking about a divorce, I had to discuss the company's matters with my father-in-law. As the wife of the founder's son, I was involved in the company's management, but after the divorce, I would just be a stranger. The next day, I went to my in-laws' house and told my father-in-law what my husband had said. My mother-in-law, who was present, was happy that my husband had a child, but she became quiet when my father-in-law glared at her. It seems my mother-in-law cares more about her grandchildren than the company's management. After thinking for a while, my father-in-law spoke with a smile.
Rose, I want you to continue participating in the company's management as usual. I don't care about Mark. I will take the responsibility, so let him do as he likes.
It seems my father-in-law cares more about the company's management than his son or grandchildren. Although he has retired, my father-in-law still has a say in the company, and he owns a large portion of the company's shares, so there are no executives who would oppose to his will. I was also finding the job interesting, so it was regrettable to give it up at this point. Now that the work issue has been settled, it's time to talk about the future with my sister. My sister, who visited our house on her day off, smiled and said, "It's too bad you couldn't have a child, Rose, isn't it? I'll give you a lot of alimony. Please, leave this house immediately." She spoke with a victorious smirk. My husband just kept silent, merely listening to our conversation without saying anything. Despite being the very cause of the problem, my husband just sat there, with an uninterested look on his face, which left me flabbergasted. I'm fine with a divorce, but we need to talk about compensation and division of property. I think it's best to get a lawyer and make everything clear. I never thought you would fall for someone like Mark, who's nothing special." I responded to my sister sarcastically. For a moment, my sister gave me a stern look, but her face quickly returned to a smirk. "I finally understand that it's not about looks, but what's inside that matters with men." I was amused by her claiming to fully understand my husband, and while trying not to laugh, I said, "That's good for you then. I hope you and Mark live happily together." She might have been talking about his money. She seemed to assume that my husband was the CEO of my father-in-law's company, but it appeared she hadn't heard anything from him. After the discussion ended, my sister stated she would start living here. As she had brought a moving company, I took only the essentials and left. Knowing my quick-to-act sister, I had predicted this would happen, and had already arranged for a new apartment. I had hired a lawyer and had all the paperwork ready for property division and claiming compensation. The next day, after I had moved all my belongings, I began negotiations for compensation and property division with my husband and sister along with my lawyer. My husband was present, still acting as if he was unrelated to this, and only my sister spoke. "As I said before, I'll pay whatever compensation you want. Just decide on your own." Hearing her words, my lawyer decided to claim compensation from my sister, in addition to my husband. My sister was still making payments on compensation claimed by her ex-husband, so the lawyer had previously advised me that claiming from her might be impossible. But since she said she'd pay anything, we decided to claim from her as well. When it came to property division, my sister said cheerfully, "This mansion is originally Mark's family property, so it wouldn't be part of the property division, right?" With an expressionless face, my lawyer answered her, "This building and land are owned by the company, so it's up to the company to decide." It seemed like my husband also thought this house belonged to his father, and he said, "Is that so? I thought this house belonged to my father," he asked, seemingly without much surprise. On the other hand, my sister turned to the lawyer. "Wait a minute. So, you're saying I can't live in this house?" The lawyer replied in an uptight way, "It's owned by the company, so if the company approves, you can continue living here." At these words, my sister seemed to relax a bit. "Why didn't you say that sooner? Since Mark, the CEO, will be living here, it should be fine, right?" The lawyer looked surprised for a moment, then burst out laughing. "What are you talking about? Your sister here is the CEO, not Mark." I laughed as I watched my sister, who was planning to remarry Mark, not knowing this fact. My sister immediately turned to Mark and shouted, "What? Mark? You're not the CEO?" Seeing Mark's troubled expression, I stepped in to explain to my sister. "Mark is just an advisor without any executive power. I'm an executive officer, but they made me the CEO too." Mark's father, the founder, had been the CEO for a long time, but when he retired, he made me an executive officer and even appointed me as the CEO. The other directors also valued my accomplishments, so there was no opposition. On the other hand, my husband was made an advisor without executive power, due to my father-in-law's arrangement. He received a director's salary, but he didn't actually have any work to do, so the amount was less than that of an ordinary employee. That's why I was the one who covered all our living expenses. My husband, who never worried about our household finances, didn't care whether the house he lived in was owned by the company or by my father-in-law. Although the house was owned by the company, my responsible father-in-law had been charging me rent, so I had always considered it to be a regular rental property. The lawyer asked me, laughing,
"So, is it okay to continue renting this house to Mark?"
My sister reacted to the word rent in the lawyer's question. "What do you mean by rent? You're going to charge Mark for it? It's company property, isn't it? Make it free!" The lawyer, laughing again at my sister's words, presented the amount of rent. My sister was surprised to see the amount, and it seemed that it was the first time my husband knew about the rent too.
"So, a big house like this does have high rent. With my salary, I can't afford it."
With his board member salary, if he pays the rent, he would be left with almost no money, making it impossible for him to live. Regarding the division of property, during our 5-year marriage, my husband used up all of his small board member salary, and my salary disappeared due to the expensive rent and living expenses. We didn't have much savings left, just enough to split the savings in half. After the lawyer left, my sister, who had been hoping for a mansion, was completely deflated when she found out it was rented, and was standing there in a daze. My husband was smiling as usual, so I suggested, "Since your mother was happy that you're having a child, why don't you move out of here and go back to your parents' house?" My husband agreed, but I found it funny that I had to be so considerate to my soon-to-be ex-husband. I was worried about whether such a helpless husband could raise a child, but it wasn't my concern, so I decided to leave. To my sister, who seemed to have forgotten about her own alimony, I asked, "Sis, are you sure about the alimony payment? You were talking big, but you're still paying the alimony for your ex-husband, right?" I talked to her just to confirm, but my sister, who looked like she had come to her senses, was surprised. "Wait, do I have to pay alimony too?" To my surprised sister, who seemed like she hadn't been listening to anything discussed today, my husband quickly responded,
"You did say I can give you plenty of alimony, but you weren't expecting that from me, were you? My salary is really low."
My husband and my sister looked at each other, both with surprised expressions. I'm not a lawyer, but watching their exchange, I felt like bursting into laughter. As far as I was concerned, I already had their signatures on the divorce papers and the alimony claim documents, so I didn't care. But my husband and my sister seemed pathetic to me. My ex-husband, who had remarried my sister, seemed to have gone back to his parents' house, as I had advised, but I heard that my sister and her in-laws were constantly fighting. The main cause was that it turned out that my sister was not really pregnant with my ex-husband's child, and his mother, who had been expecting an heir, was furious. My ex-father-in-law, who seemed to have disliked my sister for taking his son away from me, didn't even talk to her. As for the alimony, my ex-father-in-law paid on my husband's behalf, and I received the full amount. But when my sister saw this, she asked her father-in-law, "Father-in-law, please, pay my alimony as well." In response to this, the father-in-law argued back,
"You have no right to call me father,"
and he yelled at her. Having received none of what she had hoped for, my sister fled from her husband's family home without a word and has been missing since. It's too stupid that she remarried my ex-husband just to bear the burden of alimony. My ex-husband seemed to want to get back together with me, but he was scolded by his father.
"Someone like you shouldn't even think about having a family, especially since you can't even manage your own affairs properly."
Even if my ex-husband asked me to get back together with him, I would never consider getting back together with him. I lost trust in him when he cheated on me with my sister, and I was appalled by his indifferent attitude during our discussions. My ex-husband was dismissed from his board position and resigned, and now he seems to be working as a temporary staff member. Meanwhile, I'm still the CEO of the company, and I am enjoying my work so much that I'm not considering remarriage. Even after parting with my ex-husband, I keep in touch with my father-in-law and receive advice from him when I'm in trouble. For now, I want to dedicate myself to the company and work hard for the sake of all my employees, as if I am married to my work. I collapsed at work and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. Following an examination, they found something and I was scheduled for an emergency surgery right away. Filled with anxiety, I contacted my husband. I'm about to go into surgery. I'll need to stay in the hospital for about a week to monitor my recovery. I thought he would rush to the hospital, but my husband responded with a hint of happiness.
A week, huh? Well, I'm sure you'll be safe at the hospital. It's a good opportunity for you to rest.
Hearing him say that, my woman's intuition kicked in and I checked my husband's credit card statements right away. Sure enough, taking advantage of my long-term hospitalization, he had gone on an overseas trip with his mistress. I couldn't forgive him. Just wait and see. I'll get back at him. After the operation, I made a remarkable recovery and started planning for revenge towards my husband. I'm looking forward to seeing my husband's face when he gets back from his trip. My name is Ashley. I've been married to Scott for 10 years now. Although I feel like I'm becoming as insignificant as an heir to Scott, that's probably normal for a couple who's been married for 10 years. Since we don't have children, we can both continue working at the same pace as when we were single, and we have no financial issues at the moment. I have believed we could continue to lead a nice, calm life and get old together. But since a few years ago, Scott's behavior has become suspicious. Although he used to not care much about his clothes and hairstyle, he's suddenly become very concerned about how he looked. Hey, when did you get those nice clothes? When I asked, Scott answered with a hint of irritation.
Does it matter? I also have to meet with colleagues outside of work sometimes.
What's more, he started buying clothes that younger people wear, and even started going to trendy hair salons.
I'm going to go get a haircut for a bit.
Every month when he went out, I unintentionally called out to him. Hey, where have you been getting your hair cut recently? Didn't you always go to that $10 salon near the station? Then my husband responded with irritation.
It's up to me how I spend my own money. You go to the hair salon too, don't you?
I'm not complaining. I was just noticing that you've been dressing up more lately.
Huh. Maybe you're being too unconcerned about how you look?
He was always working late or out on business trips, so I didn't particularly care about when he came home. However, I noticed that whenever he came home late, he always smelled like perfume. Hey, this suit. It has a smell. It's like woman's perfume. When I asked him, Scott looked awkward.
Yeah. Now that you mention it, there was a woman on the crowded bus back home who had a strong perfume. It might have gotten onto me.
His excuse seemed extremely suspicious. His behavior pointed to only one thing. Clearly, these were signs of affair. Looking at our bank account, I saw our savings had been decreasing rapidly for the past few years. He must be spending it on his mistress. Who could it be? how should I find out the truth, and what should I do if he really was having an affair? Thinking about these things on my own, I gradually lost my appetite and began to feel depressed. One day, I collapsed at work. Ashley, are you okay? I'm calling an ambulance right now. As my consciousness was fading, I could hear my colleague's voice in the distance. And when I woke up, I was on a hospital bed. I must have been stressed because of Scott. The doctor who examined me suggested that I should be admitted for tests just in case. I thought I could go home right away, so I hadn't prepared anything and immediately called Scott. Hello, Scott. I collapsed at work today and was taken to the hospital by ambulance.
An ambulance? What the hell happened? Are you at the hospital now?
Yes, I have to be admitted for tests today.
It's nothing serious, right?
Probably just stress, I think. I couldn't quite say that it was because of Scott's affair, so I tried to cover it up. Then, Scott, seeming relieved, said this.
Well, you really scared me. So you're not coming home today?
Yeah, the test results won't be out until tomorrow.
I see, I understand. The hospital will prepare everything for you, right? I don't need to do anything else, do I?
Huh? Well, I guess it's fine. But you will be there with me to hear the results of the examination tomorrow, won't you?
Huh? Do I really need to be there? I won't understand anything anyway. I don't know anything about medicine or illnesses.
Hey, you can't be serious. I don't want to hear the results just by myself. When I cried out, Scott reluctantly agreed to come to the hospital. The next day, hearing the test results with my husband, I couldn't believe my own ears. The doctor told me,
"We're going to conduct a surgery right away because you're showing signs of a stroke."
Looking at Scott next to me, he looked just as surprised. Scott took a moment to digest the news and then asked the doctor,
"So does that mean she can't go home today?" "Of course. She will have to be admitted immediately today, and we will perform the surgery tomorrow or the day after." "And how long until she can be discharged from the hospital?" "Well, depending on her recovery after surgery, it should be about a week." "A week? I see. Understood."
Leaving the doctor's office with a heavy heart, Scott said,
"I'm going to make a call,"
and moved a bit away. From down the hall, I could hear him talking to someone.
"So, I won't be around for a week. What an opportunity. Might as well."
After he finished his call and came back, Scott quickly started preparing to leave. I stopped him right away. Wait a minute. Are you leaving already? I wanted to talk more."
"Talk? About what? We've heard everything from the doctor, haven't we? There's nothing else to do but leave it to the hospital. This place seems like a proper hospital. There's nothing to worry about. You should rest well. Good luck with your surgery."
Leaving these cheerful words, Scott quickly left. And despite trying to inform him about the time of the surgery over the phone, he never picked up the phone call. From then on, Scott never showed up at the hospital and I was left alone, facing the surgery with great anxiety. The surgery was successful, but days passed without any texts or calls from Scott, and he didn't come to the hospital. When I called our home phone, it would always take me to the answering machine, and his cell phone was unreachable. I remember the phone call he had made. With a bad feeling, I checked Scott's card statement online. What was recorded in the statement was the purchase of 2 plane tickets, and it was to Hawaii. While I was in the hospital feeling anxious, Scott was off enjoying a vacation with his mistress. And that wasn't all. Expensive designer items costing hundreds of thousands of dollars and bills from luxurious restaurants. He was extravagantly wasting tremendous amount of money that I'd never seen before. Furthermore, I was able to determine from the card statement where Scott and his mistress had stayed, and from there, I was able to find her social media account. On his mistress's social media, perhaps thinking they would never get caught, there were countless pictures posted of her dates with Scott. With all the evidence right in front of me, anger towards Scott began to boil within me. I couldn't forgive him. I would punish him, for sure. After the surgery, lying in the hospital bed, I spent all my time thinking about how to punish Scott. Eventually, I came up with a plan. From then on, to my own surprise, I felt a surge of strength form within me. And before the surgery, I was overwhelmed with anxiety, but now my anger towards Scott had become a source of power, and all I could think about was getting better as soon as possible to carry out my revenge. Even the doctor who came to check my post-surgery progress was surprised.
That's amazing. It's rare for someone to recover this quickly. Did something happen?
I answered with a grin. I have something important to do, so I wanted to be discharged as soon as possible. And so, I, who had recovered at a miraculous speed, was discharged earlier than the schedule. Without informing my husband that my discharge date was brought forward, I returned home alone. If he's only going to get my voicemail anyway, there's no need to say anything to him. And besides, I have a lot to do from now on. There's no time to rest. I started meticulously preparing for my revenge. Scott contacted my cell phone on the originally planned discharge date.
Ashley, I went to the hospital, but they said you'd already been discharged.
Yes, my post-surgery progress was good, so I was discharged early.
You should have let me know.
It seems like your phone has been off for a while.
Yeah. It just ran out of battery. My bad. I'll head home now.
An hour later, Scott called me again.
Hey, Ashley, what the hell is this?
Oh, what do you mean?
Don't play dumb. Our house is gone.
Oh, you noticed? I figured we didn't need it anymore, so I've demolished it and put the land up for sale. It's a prime location. I expect it'll sell quickly.
What the hell are you talking about? We didn't need it? This house is both our property. You think you can just get rid of it?
Oh, I didn't expect to hear both our property from your mouth.
What do you mean?
Our joint bank account. It's also both our property, right? I've known for a while that you've been using it freely.
That's because I have social obligations for work.
Social obligations, huh? Going on a vacation with your mistress? That's work too?
How did you know?
Your carelessness is astounding. I can check the credit card statements too. The overseas trip, the accommodations, the restaurants, and the branded items for women. I know you spent it all on her. After I said that, Scott got quiet, and I continued. You're the one who first misused our joint account, right? I'm taking the money I made from selling the house. That should cover what you gave your mistress, plus my alimony.
Alimony? What about our living situation now that you've sold our house?
Our? Do you think we're going to live together after this? Of course I'm going to divorce a husband like you who prioritizes a trip with his mistress over his own wife who got hospitalized.
Divorce? Wait, it was just a fling. I never wanted to divorce you.
You spent over $1 million on a fling? Then I really don't want to live with such a stupid man like you. And you prioritized a vacation with your mistress over your wife's emergency surgery. So that means I'm less than a fling to you. How could we possibly live together after I've been so disrespected like that?
It's not like that. You're my precious wife.
You think I'd believe you now? No matter what you say, I don't want to see your face anymore. I'll live freely in my new home. You can go to your mistress or do whatever you like.
Are you serious? You'll regret this.
The one who will regret is me for spending these 10 years of married life with you.
Have you forgotten these 10 years that I've provided for you?
Provided for me? Don't be ridiculous. The savings you had used so carelessly included money I earned from my work too. How dare you act all high and mighty after using it as if it's just yours?
Don't you have any sympathy? Is this how you treat your husband who has been with you for so many years?
I could say the same thing to you. And oh, I'll return those exact words to you, who has been betraying your own wife for years. Out of kindness, I left your belongings at the disposal area. But if you take your time, the collectors might collect them already.
No way! Damn it! Screw this! I don't want anything to do with you anymore.
Saying that, Scott hung up the phone. He must be rushing to that disposal area. While taking out the trash, I placed the divorce papers on top of the trash. By now, Scott must have noticed the divorce papers. After saying at least this much, he should agree to the divorce. Hoping I would never hear from him again, I was about to start my new life. However, within a month, I received another call from Scott. What do you want? I have nothing more to talk about with you. Just as I was about to hang up the phone, I heard Scott's screaming voice from the other end.
Wait! Don't hang up! I haven't submitted the divorce papers yet. I am still your husband. Listen to your husband.
He hasn't submitted the divorce papers? Unable to ignore his words, I was forced to listen to Scott. What do you mean you haven't submitted them?
Oh, well, I decided to live with her, but I've decided to wait and see before divorcing and getting married again. And that was the right decision.
Why?
That woman spends money like crazy. And she says things like, if we get married, I want to be a stay-at-home wife. Even if I have savings, it wouldn't be enough if I married her.
I knew that before you two started living together. It's more surprising that you didn't notice her spending habits after showering her with so much money. Then Scott said this, sounding impressed.
I see. Ashley, you're really independent, huh? I am convinced by your words just now. You're the only one who can be my wife.
Huh?
Ashley, let's start over. You've just been sick and it must be scary to be alone, right?
Is this guy an idiot? Such a man wouldn't understand unless spoken to harshly. I took a deep breath and raised my voice. Worried? How dare you even say that? The time when I was the most scared was when I was alone in the hospital on the day of surgery. When I was trembling with fear of the surgery, and when I was enduring the pain post-op. You weren't even there by my side.
I'm truly sorry about that time. I wasn't thinking straight.
It's not just about that time, is it? After all, you've been cheating on me, so how dare you say such a thing?
A lot has happened, but I need you, Ashley. Don't you feel the same? That's why you spent these past 10 years with me.
Don't be ridiculous. This time, I've confirmed that it's no good being with you. I can't imagine spending the rest of my life with someone who can't build a trusting relationship.
So, you're saying you don't want to give us another chance?
Yes, not at all.
You have no feelings for me anymore?
My love for you disappeared long ago. I thought we could live the rest of our lives always being grateful to each other as a family because I still had affection for you. The one who trampled on those feelings was you, Scott. To Scott, who got very quiet, I left with these final words. However, there's one thing I thank you for. After knowing about your affair, I was filled with determination, thinking that I couldn't afford to be sick with all these anger I had towards you. And so, I decided to demolish and sell our house before you returned from your affair trip.
What the hell?
Thanks to that, I was able to recover so quickly that even my doctor was surprised. It seems like my anger towards you became a driving force to live. I'll thank you for just that.
Please, think carefully about this, Ashley.
I already did. Well then, fall into hell with your lover. Goodbye. I hung up the phone without listening to Scott's reply and called my lawyer right away. I couldn't bear to delay the divorce any longer. I intended to fight it over court. I have saved all the evidence of Scott's affair and made it ready to submit to the lawyer. Divorce proceedings and claims for compensation are likely to go smoothly. If I leave everything to the lawyer, I won't need to contact Scott again. I changed my smartphone number to a new one so that I never receive any calls from him again. I doubt he will come to my workplace. Even if he does, I've already explained the situation to my colleagues. Because of Scott's bad reputation in the office, if anyone sees him, they will contact me immediately, and everyone will cooperate to make sure we don't bump into each other. After that, everything went according to my plan. Scott, having received a call from the lawyer, calmly agreed to the divorce and accepted my claim for alimony. As for his affair partner, she seemed to get the hint that she couldn't make any more excuses any longer, and acknowledged that she had to pay the alimony. It appeared she was fully intent on marrying Scott once the divorce was final, thinking Scott's savings were now hers as well, and she would have him pay her share of the alimony from his account. At this rate, his savings would likely be gone in no time. Things seem likely to drag on with his affair partner, and Scott will for sure have a difficult time ahead in the future. That being said, I feel no sympathy whatsoever. He brought it upon himself by having an affair with a woman obsessed with money. On the other hand, with the money from selling the house and the alimony from the divorce, I was able to rent a place which was the exact same size as the room I lived in before. I can't get back the wasted 10 years I spent with Scott, but from now on, I can live without being controlled by him. If I were to remarry, I decided in my heart that this time, I would marry someone with whom I can build a solid, trusting relationship. That's what I decided in my heart.
My daughter is joining the company, so I need you to resign. Today is your last day.
It was on the morning of the 20th that I was suddenly told by the president that I was fired. Huh? But I was surprised and at a loss for words. The 20th was the payment day to our suppliers. Although there were bank transfers for some long-standing suppliers, I would go and make direct payments, also serving as a courtesy call.
You look like you can go home right away. I'll give you the day off especially for you, so leave quickly.
I was pushed forcefully from behind out of the office, and the door was shut with a snap right in front of my nose. I had no idea where to start objecting. My name is Emily. I joined this family-owned paving company right after high school and have been a clerical worker for 10 years. Or rather, I should say I was a clerical worker until just now. There were about 20 employees, and when the current chairman was the president, the workplace atmosphere was good, and it was a very easy company to work for. Even the chairman, who has now retired from the field, used to work proactively with the younger employees, and Catherine, his wife, would come to the company every day to handle miscellaneous tasks until the chairman was hospitalized. Kelly, their daughter, was a versatile person who could handle both field and office work, and her husband, as the site manager, was trusted by the employees who worked on site. Just because they were the founding family, nobody acted haughty or looked down on the employees. It would have been nice if the enjoyable and trouble-free company life had continued as it was, but unfortunately, reality was not so sweet. At the end of last year, cancer was discovered in the chairman during the company's group medical examination, and he decided to retire as president, appointing Kelly's husband, the site manager, as the next president. Both myself and the other employees unanimously agreed. Everyone agreed that the chairman should focus on treatment and that they wanted him to live a long life. However, suddenly the chairman's eldest son, Tom, who I didn't know where he heard the news from, appeared with his family. It seems that the chairman had another child besides Kelly. Tom had been disowned about 30 years ago, and I didn't know about it at all. According to the senior employees, Tom was a notorious bad guy in his youth, and he was often in trouble with the police. Whenever he caused problems, it seemed that the chairman and Catherine would go and apologize. After dropping out of high school, he started engaging in multi-level marketing and fraudulent-like activities, and the chairman finally disowned him. Despite having been out of touch for a long time, Tom suddenly showed up one day, shouting,
"Dad, I was wrong all this time. Forgive me,"
and pleaded before the chairman. I was shocked. Since the company was small and there was only one room for both the president's office and the clerical room, I witnessed the whole thing and remember it well. Tom said that he wanted to let bygones be bygones and work together in the company, but I think that's not a phrase to be said by someone who's been disowned.
"I apologize to everyone, but I beg you, I want you to give Tom one more chance."
Kelly and the veteran employees seemed unable to fully rejoice since they knew about Tom's past, but no one could refuse when the chairman pleaded like that. Thus, Tom's family came to live in the annex of the chairman's house, and Tom became an employee, while his wife took charge of the household chores as a housewife. The daughter seemed to be a college student, and I only saw her once when she came to the company. The chairman said,
"Having struggled in the world, Tom must have become decent now."
Catherine was also crying with joy that Tom had come back with his family. They were talking about building up the company together from now on. But then, a problem arose. Tom insisted,
"I'm the eldest son, so I should be the next president."
And the relationship with Kelly and the site manager became strained. In front of the chairman, he pretended to work hard, but in reality, he did nothing. He kept making power harassment-like comments such as,
"Physical labor is what the workers do,"
and
"You are worker ants. Work in silence."
He was quickly disliked by everyone. Some of the younger employees even went directly to the chairman to say,
"I can't work like this."
But both the chairman and Catherine only pleaded and said,
"We will scold Tom, so please look at this with a longer perspective."
Then, whether due to stress or something else, the chairman's cancer suddenly worsened, and he was hospitalized 3 months ago. Then Tom declared,
"I am the president."
The employees advised the chairman and Catherine to make the site manager the president as originally planned, but in the end they chose Tom, their blood relative, over their daughter's husband. Some people even started to grumble, saying things like,
"They're blinded by parental love," or "They've become senile."
The once harmonious and joyful atmosphere of the company completely changed, and it became all tense and awkward. Everyone thought that things couldn't continue like this, and finally, Kelly started to take action with the site manager behind the scenes. Consequently, I ended up being the only one handling the company's administrative tasks. Until now, it was Catherine, Kelly, and me, so I could leave on time, but now I have to work overtime every day. It's not unusual for the date to change before I leave, Even so, Tom seems to think that administrative work is just a leisurely task. The president himself spends his time going to hostess bars during the day or going out to bet on horse races or go gambling. My relationship with the president deteriorated dramatically due to an issue with an expense. He used the company's credit card for his private dining and entertainment expenses, and to some extent I have been turning a blind eye to it. But this time, it was at an unacceptable level. I braced myself for his anger and handed the receipt back to the president. This expense cannot be approved.
What? Why?
This is your wife's corrective underwear. It has nothing to do with the business, so it cannot be expensed. As expected, the president's face turned red with anger.
Don't mess with me. She's the president's wife. It's only natural for her to dress up. It's an expense.
No, but it's underwear. And your wife isn't an employee either, I stammered in reply, wondering how the president could think that a $4,000 expense for his wife's corrective underwear could possibly be justified as a business expense. What he said next was even more incomprehensible to me.
Then let's make the sale of corrective underwear our new business venture. That way it will be considered a purchase, so it's an expense.
The president looked smug as if he had come up with a brilliant idea, but I was dumbfounded. We are a paving company.
So what? We can tell our clients that if they don't buy from us, we'll cut off their contracts. Everyone will buy. We'll make a fortune. $2,000 for one, $4,000 for a set. It's an easy business.
The president laughed loudly, but I was horrified. That's absolutely unacceptable. It will cause a credibility issue. In my anger, I snapped at him, and from that moment on, I became the target of the president's disdain. From that day forward, I was constantly berated by the president. It was so hard that I considered quitting many times, but I continued to endure and work, motivated by my desire to help the chairman, who had taken care of me, and my concern that everyone else would be in trouble if I left. The reality was, I would be in trouble too if I suddenly lost my job. I thought I would just endure it until I was ready to move on, but then I was abruptly fired. If I quit suddenly now, it will cause trouble for our clients. I took a deep breath and opened the door. I can't do this. I can't just quit on such short notice. Without any handover, even your daughter can't do the work. Besides, today is the payment day. I said all this in one breath, expecting the president to become furious. As I thought, the president's face turned red with rage.
Shut up. I told you to quit because my daughter is joining the company. Today is your last day. As for the payment, just let them wait until they come to collect it. There's no need to pay them proactively.
Excuse me? Isn't it normal to pay for something once you buy it? I was so taken aback that I explained it like I would to a child, only for the president to say something so unreasonable that I couldn't believe he was a rational adult.
If that's the case, just threaten to change to another supplier. Tell them we won't go to make the payment this time, so they should give it to us for free.
What? That's not something we can do, is it? I was so flabbergasted that I was at a loss for words.
You're utterly useless. My daughter has a college degree. She can easily do office work. Since she's family, she won't complain about what I buy. Unlike you, who's all talk and no action, we don't need someone like you in our company. Get out now.
In other words, the president is probably thinking that by having his daughter handle the accounting, he can easily write off his personal expenses as company expenses. Oh, is that so? Just remember, I won't regret it. It's hopeless. Words are no longer effective. My patience has finally run out. I gathered my personal belongings and left the company in a hurry. But still, I felt bad for our clients. I called Kelly. I knew Catherine was busy nursing the chairman, and Kelly was also occupied, but this was an emergency. I explained the situation and left the rest to Kelly. Once I left the company, I suddenly found myself with nothing to do. Being fired without notice is a clear violation of the labor standards law. If I report it to the Labor Standards Office, they are done for. Since our company was enrolled in the middle company payment system, I can claim my severance pay and 1 month's salary. The middle company payment system is a government severance pay system for small and medium-sized enterprises, a strong ally for companies that can't prepare severance pay on their own. But I don't need to rush the process since I can apply within 5 years from the date of retirement, and the statute of limitations for the Labor Standards Office is 2 years. Due to my professional habits in office work, I calculated the necessary procedures and schedule for retirement and concluded that I could take it easy for at least a week. Lately, I've been constantly working overtime and on weekends, unable to do anything at home. And there are many places I wanted to visit once I settled down. So I decided to go on a day trip to the beach. After refreshing myself at the beach, I checked my smartphone in the locker and found several missed calls, emails, and voicemails. Checking the email, I found a message from Kelly saying, "The payment went smoothly. Everything is prepared." I was relieved. Even though the president suddenly told me to quit, I felt guilty for leaving my job in anger. Next, I listened to the voicemail from the company. It was the panicked voice of the president saying,
Hey, what's going on? You're saying I'm not the real president? Did you know this? Explain yourself properly.
As he finally realized, what a stupid president. I couldn't help but smirk. Then I checked my emails and voicemails one by one, listened to a voicemail from the chairman, and promptly decided to go to the hospital. When I arrived at the chairman's hospital room in the evening, not only was Catherine there, but the president was there as well. As soon as the chairman saw me, he abruptly greeted me on the bed.
Emily, I'm truly sorry for my foolish son. Hey, what's going on? I'm not the official president? Explain yourself.
Tom was arrogantly shouting, unable to grasp the situation, but the chairman quickly shouted him down.
You, be quiet.
It seems that right after I called Kelly, she immediately contacted the chairman and Catherine. Upon hearing this, the chairman hurriedly called Tom, the president, and asked,
Don't you really know anything? So what's going on?
I calmly spilled the beans to the president, who was shouting without understanding the situation, saying, "Basically, Tom, you had no legal influence. You were a president in name only. It might be a confusing and unclear story without knowledge, but president is a term that indicates a role within the company, not a role defined by law. The one who represents the company and has external responsibility is the representative director, and it is entirely different from a mere president. The title of president alone can be freely changed within the company, but to change the representative director, complex procedures are necessary, and it's quite a hassle. 3 months ago, when it was decided that Tom would become president, there was intense opposition from Kelly, the site manager, and veteran employees. So I proposed a method to make Tom a nominal president, while keeping the chairman as the representative director. As a clerk, I knew about the difficulty of the procedures and the laws related to the company, so I came up with this method. If Tom changed his heart and worked seriously and was accepted by all employees, only then would we begin the legal procedures. Conversely, if Tom was deemed unfit to be the president, the plan was to either to dismiss him or close the company, with Kelly and the site manager preparing to start a new company. Kelly didn't think Tom's personality would change. The chairman and Catherine had believed in Tom until the end, but it seems they were awakened when Tom unjustly dismissed me.
If you want to be an entrepreneur, study hard and take care of your employees. I told you many times. It's not a big deal, isn't it? We can just do the procedures now, right? No, it's impossible. You see, our company gives company stock to employees who desire it, and most of them have it. Emily owns 10%, so she's a major shareholder in our company. We can't ignore Emily's opinions, and the other employees who own company stock will certainly not side with you.
Gradually absorbing the situation, the president's face turns pale.
What? But I have stocks too, right? 0. I was planning to give you my shares once you truly became president. I'm deeply disappointed in you. You were only after my wealth, thinking that I have only a little time left. Weren't you?
The chairman slumps in despair, and Catherine also falls silent with a sad look on her face. The president brazenly retorts,
Huh! Of course, I'm the eldest son. What's wrong with taking what I can get? The company is mine.
I couldn't forgive him any longer. No, that's not correct. The chairman holds full responsibility as the representative director of the company. Plus, I'm a shareholder. I can request a shareholders' meeting and seek the president's dismissal. Understanding the word dismissal, the president turns pale rapidly.
You mean I might get fired? Damn, weren't you just an office worker? Tom, Emily is right. Now that things have come to this, no one will stand by you. Only Emily spoke up to give you a chance.
Catherine then opens her mouth. Emily, I truly owe you an apology. I'm sorry for causing you trouble out of love for my son. Please tell me what you'd like to do. I look at the president. President, I don't want to work under you anymore, so I'll quit right now. However, I will take my severance pay, and I want you to pay my 1 month's salary, including unpaid overtime and holiday work. I will also report to the Labor Standards Office, and as a shareholder, I will fight thoroughly to remove anyone harmful to the company. As I smile and speak, the president turns from pale to completely white. I go on to tell about how Kelly had been visiting clients and successfully promoting our new company. Most clients have given up on our current company and have decided to switch to the new one. Almost all of our employees are also planning to move to the new company.
That's impossible. I'll sue you.
The president threatens, almost in tears, but the chairman dismisses him.
I am the representative director. You have no such rights.
Then the president can no longer stand and collapses to his knees. I feel indescribable. Mr. President, it's a shame that this happened. If you had changed your attitude when you returned, it wouldn't have come to this. There were many chances to understand if he had repeatedly tried, researched, and studied. The one who squandered the opportunity was none other than the president himself, a complete case of reaping what he sowed. Later on, eventually, the chairman closed down the company, and Tom became unemployed. The president's wife started selling corrective underwear, but it didn't sell at all. They were reported for malicious door-to-door sales and were eventually arrested for pyramid scheming. When Kelly returned to her parents' house for an errand, there seemed to be several boxes left filled with the forceful underwear. The daughter seems to have found employment at another company, though the details are unknown. I now work at Kelly's and the site manager's new company, and I can work happily every day. I want to continue to cherish my relationships with people and live sincerely. You really seem like you're not busy all the time, right? Not working. I wonder what you're doing. My mother-in-law would sneer at me daily like this. She's already 70, but all she seems to be able to do is to be mean. Or perhaps it's due to her age that she's gradually becoming mean to me like that. So far, the elderly people I've met have either been very kind or very nasty, with no in-between, so that might be why I think this way. My name is Molly, a 45-year-old housewife. I live in my husband's family home. We have a daughter, who is already a third-year university student. As our daughter attends a university far away, she lives in a dormitory. She chose to move into a strict dormitory over an apartment because she wanted to avoid being a burden to us. So now, living in the family home are my mother-in-law, husband, me, and my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law is 50, older than me, and is not married. Well, in other words, she's someone who earns money but prefers to live rent-free with her parents. She spends all her earnings on herself and seems to plan on living off her mother's pension. She does occasionally contribute to household expenses, but that's only about $100. But maybe it can't be helped that she can only contribute that much, because she's just a part-time worker. She apparently started working full-time for a small company after graduating high school, but she caused some trouble at work and ended up quitting. Actually, I think she might have been forced to quit work. Then, finding full-time work bothersome, she started working part-time. So, she's exactly what you'd call a part-timer. And so, she's been idling along and reached to this age. I think it's fine that she's unmarried and works part-time, as long as she doesn't bother anyone else. But my sister-in-law looks down on me and speaks in a condescending manner. She belittles and looks down on me for doing housework during the day.
Being capable of nothing but housework. How incompetent. Can't you even work any part-time jobs? You're at the bottom of the society.
Well, I don't mind being at the bottom.
You quit your old job, didn't you? You probably caused some sort of problem, didn't you?
Excuse me? My sister-in-law, despite having caused problems at her own company, had the audacity to say that to me. I didn't quit my former job due to any issues, so I denied it. I haven't done anything. Unlike you, I'm not malicious.
What did you say? What are you talking about? I gave an advice to my colleague for his sake. Then he claimed that he was mentally drained, making me out to be the bad guy.
Ah, is that so? Knowing my sister-in-law, she probably showed a very intimidating attitude. I ended up feeling sorry for her colleague. If someone like her were at a company, it would be troublesome. Perhaps it's good that she left. She really is an unpleasant sister-in-law. I hate my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law, and my husband. I've refrained from divorcing my husband at this age, though the thought of divorce often crosses my mind. All of them are nasty and have twisted personalities, so dealing with them is exhausting. One night, my mother-in-law seemed to wake up to go to the toilet, and seeing a light in my room, she peeped in.
You're awake at this hour? What are you doing?
I'm working.
Working, huh? It's not like you can do much from home.
Okay.
Well, do your best, I guess.
I work from home. I am busy with housework during the day, so I often work at night. Also, the quiet of the night makes it easier to get work done. There are even some renowned writers who do their writing in the middle of the night, so I believe there must be a certain number of people who become active at night. I am certainly one of them. Then, after a while, a serious situation developed. It turned out that my mother-in-law had overspent her savings and was on the brink of bankruptcy. Upon hearing the story, I found out that she was $140,000 in debt.
Oh, what am I going to do? $140,000! I don't want to be bankrupt.
Well, but $140,000 is a lot of money. Maybe it would be better to file for bankruptcy.
I know. You can pay for it. You used to earn a lot when you were younger, right? You had a salary of $56,000 at that major company, didn't you?
Huh? Oh, well, yes, I did.
That's why I'm counting on you.
Indeed, I have been working hard when I was younger. I was what you would call a career woman, earning more than many men. I really didn't want to, but I agreed to pay off the debt under one condition: that my mother-in-law would take care of the house chores. I would handle the heavy lifting chores, but I thought I'd have her do the dishes and simple cleaning. If she did that, I, a night owl, might be able to concentrate on my work during the day with headphones on. I proposed this to my mother-in-law and she quickly agreed. And so I repaid the $140,000 debt in full.
Phew! All that work is tiring. Mom, are you okay? Oh, yes, I'm fine, but you know, that daughter-in-law of mine is working me to the bone. She said that since she's paying off my debt, I have to do a lot of housework. She's using me like her slave, making me work so hard at my age. That's terrible. What's wrong with her? Hey, Molly?
Yes, what is it?
You're awful, abusing your mother-in-law like that. How can you treat an elderly woman like that and feel good about it?
No, I'm not overworking her. I'm just asking her to do simple house chores.
That's not true. She's making me carry heavy laundry clothes and buy lots of groceries. See, she's saying that. This is called abusing the elderly people.
What? I never asked her to do such a thing.
Be quiet. You're the one who took advantage of my weakness and proposed this deal. You say you want to work during the day with headphones on, but you're not even making money, are you? You quit a good company. You're just a housewife. No, you're just a slave. That's right. Don't get ahead of yourself. You're not even earning decent money, yet you talk about work. People like you, who doesn't earn much, should get out.
I got it. I was saddened. I truly wasn't demanding any unreasonable housework. However, my mother-in-law, in an attempt to portray herself as a poor old lady, would intentionally stumble along and carry heavy things. My sister-in-law, upon seeing this, got the wrong idea that I was making her do so. I realized I had been tricked by my mother-in-law. Even when I told my husband about this, he didn't say anything. I was done with my husband too. When I asked my daughter, who lives far away, if I could divorce, she said I should do it quickly. So, I made up my mind to divorce and filed for it. And I started packing my belongings. Since I wasn't told to leave immediately, I thought I'd take only what I needed for my things in the house. Then, the moving day came. First, I had all my belongings loaded into the moving van. The furniture that I bought when I was single, which I cherished them, and the home appliances that I bought were all loaded into the van. My mother-in-law and her family were making a huge fuss.
Why are you taking the vacuum cleaner too? You should leave this here.
No, because I bought it with my money.
What are you talking about? It's a family thing, isn't it?
But I was the only one using the vacuum cleaner. Oh, I also need to take the microwave and the oven.
Stop it! What are you doing?
Well, I bought these with my savings, so it's okay, right? I think you should buy a new one. My husband, too, was also saying things like,
Stop taking the bookshelf.
But even that bookshelf was originally mine. He had only been using it as he pleased and occupying it. So I removed all of his books and had it moved. As a result, there was hardly any furniture left in my in-laws' house. All that was left was the dining table in the living room, the sofa, and the bed. Even the dressers of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were ones that I bought for them, so I thought I would take them and sell them. I thought I might get a little money if I took them to a recycle shop. Then, the police arrived. My mother-in-law and rest of the family didn't expect any police at their home. However, the real drama was about to start.
Huh? Why the police? Don't tell me you've done something.
No, I haven't done anything. Unlike you.
Huh? What do you mean?
Well, unlike you, I haven't committed a crime. You remember, don't you?
What?
My mother-in-law got quiet. In reality, the reason for my mother-in-law's debt was due to an endless pyramid scheme. She was forcibly recruiting her friends and acquaintances to join the scheme, utilizing malicious tactics. And she herself was buying a lot of their products. I had wondered why there were so many cardboard boxes in the house, but when I opened them, they were all suspicious items. There were teas, supplements that I don't know if they were all really good for health, as well as pots and pans. Among them, the most expensive items were crystal balls and bracelets. Apparently, having these crystal balls and bracelets is supposed to bring good luck. My mother-in-law blindly believed in the organization and was buying their products endlessly. There's no way one can become lucky with these things. On the contrary, it would only increase the debt. That's probably why she ended up spending $140,000. It was a foolish thing to do on her end.
No, let me go. I didn't forcibly recruit anyone.
Well, we have evidence that you did forcibly recruit them. We even have recordings and videos.
No way. Stop. What are you going to do with an old lady like me? This is called harassing the elderly.
There is no young or old in crime. Regardless of age, those who do wrong get arrested. Now get in the car.
No. Mom, stop. Don't take her away.
Like that, my mother-in-law was taken away by the police. After confirming that she was taken away, I drove off. The place I arrived at was my new residence. It's a bit small, but it's enough space for one person. My daughter will probably only come to visit me occasionally, so I don't need a large apartment. And thus, my new life began. However, I really want to get back that $140,000. So I thought I would have to pressure my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law, having been fined less than $3,000 for fraud, must be feeling the pressure mentally. I decided to add to that pressure. My mother-in-law, who couldn't even pay the fine, seemed to have sold the house reluctantly. Probably because neither her daughter nor my ex-husband would even pay the fine of less than $3,000. Although I didn't want to, I decided to visit my mother-in-law again. And I thought I would tell her that I wanted my money back. After all, it's not like I was happy to give her the $140,000, and I was deceived by her after paying the amount. So, I went to the house of the relatives who were taking care of my mother-in-law's family.
What are you here for?
You sold the house, didn't you? So you still have money, right?
Huh? Well, yes, I do.
How much do you have? Please, be honest.
The land and the house together made $140,000. It was a good location, so it sold for that price even though it's old.
Oh, in that case, I'll have you return the $140,000. The $140,000 that I paid.
What? That's impossible. I was saving it for a new apartment.
Oh, you're going to buy a new apartment? How dare you, despite still doing wrong things.
Huh? What wrong things?
Aren't you having an affair with Mr. Brown from the neighborhood? I heard it from a gossip-loving lady.
Wait a minute.
My mother-in-law was widowed after the death of her husband. Indeed, her husband passed away when she was 60. I understand that she might be lonely, but I think it's questionable to lay a hand on a married man from elsewhere. Well, that man, Mr. Brown, is a 75-year-old elderly man. I guess they both must be pretty energetic. I have a video here as proof. Would you like to watch it?
Stop it!
Alright, I'll play it then. Ignoring my mother-in-law's voice, I started playing the video on my phone. The video shows my mother-in-law and Mr. Brown having a dirty conversation and doing strange things. What on earth are they doing in broad daylight on a road where people pass by? I thought it was embarrassing to be over 70 and not have any discretion. If you return the $140,000, I'll keep quiet about this to Miss Brown. So, what will you do?
Considering the cost of paying compensation is cheaper than paying you $140,000. It's better if Miss Brown finds out.
Indeed, the compensation is only a few $1,000s, so it's much cheaper than giving me $140,000. With that in mind, I shoved several photos in front of my mother-in-law. I had printed the photos from my phone at a store earlier on. Oh, really? So even with these, you can still say that? Let's say, hypothetically, the compensation is $7,000 per person. 10 people would be $70,000, and 20 people would be $140,000, right? The number of married men you've been involved with is 30, isn't it?
No!
You're very energetic, even though you were acting so weak in front of me. Being able to date 30 people at the same time? What a femme fatale. And all of them are married men. How scary. You're quite something. That's right. It wasn't just Mr. Brown who my mother-in-law was involved with. Incredibly, she was dating almost all of the men in the neighborhood. Moreover, all of them were married and still had their spouses. How can she manage to date 30 people at the same time, I wonder? Maybe she had it arranged, like this person on Monday, this person Tuesday, and so on. She's truly a terrifying old woman. Could you return the $140,000 to me if you don't want this to get out?
I'll pay, so please don't say a word. I beg you, please, forgive me.
Understood. Then I expect $140,000 by next Friday. You can break it up into multiple transfers. That would be fine.
Yes, understood. I promise I'll repay.
Thus, I returned home with a great sense of satisfaction. And indeed, my mother-in-law returned the $140,000 in several installments. But it wasn't over yet. I sent photos to those wives. Of course, the photos showed their husbands with my mother-in-law being together. This way, my mother-in-law's misdeeds became well known throughout the neighborhood.
You! How could you expose me like that? You said you wouldn't say anything.
I didn't say anything. Instead, I sent letters. Since I didn't directly say anything to them person to person, it's okay, right?
Stop quibbling! You deceived me. Now everyone is calling me a dirty old woman. What are you going to do about it? I'm being sued for damages. It's hell.
What? Then can't you pay it from your pension, your daughter's part-time job income, and your son's salary? Let's all work hard together to pay it off. I'll be cheering for you. Keep it up. Keep it up.
Are you making fun of me? I feel terrible. Now I have no future.
Well, since you were already sinking in debt, your future was over from the beginning, right? So whatever happens from here on out is fine, right? This is a new start to your life. It's great that you started in a debt of hell.
Why did this have to happen? It's because you're a curse.
Fine, I'm a curse. Thank you for driving such a curse away. Thanks to you, I can now live a stress-free life. In the end, my mother-in-law had to pay damages to the wives. Naturally, she couldn't manage it alone, so she ended up using the money from her daughter's part-time job and her son's salary. As a result, they ended up in poverty. I heard that they were even ostracized by their relatives and driven out. I have no idea where they're living now. As for me, I'm still working from home. Currently, I'm programming. I had a different job when I was younger, but now I'm really into this. I find peace working in the quiet hours of the night. Just the thought of not having to be in that hellish in-laws house anymore brings me so much happiness. From now on, I plan to save money for my own sake and for when my daughter gets married someday.
Ahaha, I forgot to tell you something. I'm sorry. Actually, I changed the bank account where my salary is deposited. On payday, I was filled with anxiety because no money was deposited from my husband's workplace. Then, unexpectedly, my husband has unilaterally changed the deposit account. To begin with, my husband's salary is small, and I am supporting us financially in most aspects. If my husband's salary is gone, I knew it would be a disaster. Despite this, my anger grew at my husband for forgetting to report such important news. I decided to end our marital life right there based on the reason that he had changed the deposit account without telling me. My name is Catherine, a 31-year-old working housewife. I live in an apartment with my husband, Patrick. Patrick is 5 years older than me. We started dating after meeting at a matchmaking party, and at that time I thought Patrick looked very mature and that if I married him, he would protect me. I wasn't right for thinking that, but I think Patrick, who hid the fact that he had debts and married me, was worse. Patrick is the type who can't suppress his desires, and if he saw a watch he likes while on a date, he'd buy it even if it's $1,500. He hardly ever has cash because of monthly credit card payments, but he always said, "I'm a man who rides the wave of the time," so I haven't made cash payments since 10 years ago. So it means that he's been living a life chased by credit card payments for the past 10 years. I want to scold my past self for thinking that he was a mature man when I saw him using a credit card. Since we started our married life, Patrick and I decided to put our salaries into one account. I thought about making it an allowance system, but Patrick only wanted to pay with his credit card, so I decided to give him an allowance of $200 per month. However, when I looked at the actual flow of money, I realized that we couldn't afford to use $200. It's because $700 is withdrawn every month from Patrick's card payments. Apparently, he's doing a monthly fixed payment. Patrick's take-home pay is $1,000 and mine is $2,000. With a payment of $700, life becomes a little harsh. Considering the future, I was too scared to spend money freely. Despite this, Patrick goes around playing as he pleases and uses his credit card. After marrying Patrick, I was shocked to find that his take-home pay was less than that of new employees at my company. I asked him the name of his company before we got married, and he said he worked for a fairly large company, so I believed him. However, Patrick wasn't completely lying. He worked part-time at a restaurant run by a large company. Moreover, he works part-time at a high-end restaurant and is usually in a suit. I was deceived even more because he looked cool in his suit when we met after work. Even such a person has a credit card limit of $3,000, which is wrong. We were able to have our wedding ceremony because my parents gave us the money, so I didn't know that Patrick was so poor. I should have discussed it more or asked him to show me his payslip, but it's too late to regret it now. About half a year after we got married, my mother-in-law came to our house. Patrick basically works on weekends and holidays, so I had to handle it by myself. My in-laws are rich because my father-in-law runs a company. Now, my brother-in-law is following his father in the business to take over the company, so Patrick is free to do as he pleases without any criticism. My mother-in-law also spoiled Patrick.
"Well, I don't know what you're thinking living in such a cheap apartment, Catherine. Patrick isn't the kind of person who should live in a house like this."
I was planning to live in a nice apartment after I got married, but things changed. I swallowed the words, "especially because of your son," and forced a smile. This is the apartment I lived in before I got married and Patrick moved in. Patrick and I looked for a condo and I left the contract to Patrick. However, Patrick did not proceed with the contract. I had already finished the cancellation procedure for my apartment, but I found out that he hadn't contracted the condo during our honeymoon. When we came back from the trip, we hurriedly renewed my contract. The main reason Patrick didn't proceed with the contract was due to financial reasons, so there's no reason for my mother-in-law to complain about us living in this apartment. However, it seems my mother-in-law was not satisfied.
I can't believe my Patrick married such a common woman."
My mother-in-law muttered that several times without saying it to anyone, and my anger grew, so I made a sarcastic remark.
Well, if Patrick had been earning decent money, we might be living in a nice house by now, don't you think? How dare you speak like that as a wife? It's as if my Patrick is the bad one. I don't know how much you're relying on my Patrick's income. As soon as you're married, you shouldn't interfere with your husband's salary. It's impolite, isn't it? I won't give you a penny of our inheritance. Inheritance? That's not my concern. You think I married for money, don't you? I can live on my own. I wouldn't get married for money. I married Patrick because I love him. I glared at my mother-in-law. Then she glared back at me. I wonder about that. Anyway, don't rely too much on my Patrick. Patrick is a delicate son. I can't bear to think of him being under the thumb of his wife. She left quickly after saying that. It seemed she came to see Patrick, not wanting to spend time with me. I was left alone and I pondered. I told my mother-in-law that I married Patrick because I loved him, but now I'm not sure if I still love him. Since we got married, various lies have been exposed and he's not reliable at all. He's reckless with money, yet he thinks he's capable. I realize that he's just a delusional man. Although he used to appear cool before now, he just looks like an unimpressive guy. Can I still say I love him despite all this? Around the time we had been married for a year, Patrick's salary was no longer being deposited into our joint account. I wondered if he had quit his part-time job and was going somewhere every day without telling me. When Patrick came home at night, I immediately confronted him. Hey, where have you been?
At work. Why?
Your salary hasn't been deposited. Did you really quit your job? Then Patrick smiled after making a blank face for a moment.
I forgot to tell you something. I'm sorry. Actually, I changed the bank account where my salary is deposited.
What? What do you mean?
I've decided to stop living on credit cards.
What?
So I realized that cash is better. As long as I use a credit card, the debt doesn't decrease, but rather continues to increase. Considering the interest I'm currently paying, I realized that I was wasting money. You can keep paying for the credit card. Once the payment is over, there won't be any interest.
The more Patrick spoke, the more my anger grew. Is there any benefit for me in this?
Once the payment is over, you won't have to withdraw $700 every month. It's good, right?
You should be the one to pay.
I can't. Then I can only spend $250 a month, so please handle the rest.
Seeing that I was furious, Patrick hurriedly left the house. Marrying that man was the biggest mistake. I was ready to start the divorce process right away, but at that time, I didn't have enough knowledge. I filled in my part on the divorce form and said, Patrick, let's get a divorce, but he refused.
Catherine, you're funny. You don't know you can't just get a divorce that easily, do you? If we're discussing divorce, we need to have a conversation. We can't get a divorce unless I agree, and I have no intention of agreeing. It's pointless. Even in the case of a mediated divorce, we need to talk it out in court. Mediators will try to persuade us not to divorce. It's time-consuming and we can't divorce unless I agree. Or are you going to sue?
Patrick said this with a smile on his face. I can tell. Patrick didn't want to let go of his cash cow, which is me. He must be enjoying the fact that he's using his entire salary as his pocket money and being supported by me. It seems like I'm the only one suffering, isn't it? Patrick not only doesn't contribute financially, but he also doesn't do any housework at all. I think it's wrong that I can't even get a divorce easily. Do I have to continue living this married life? While feeling such despair, I lived a life balancing household chores and work. I wonder how much I haven't been spending on myself anymore. Before getting married, I had many hobbies and lived happily. Will I continue to be exploited by Patrick? Just looking at Patrick's carefree, worry-free, smiling face gives me the creeps. I tried to keep my distance from him as much as possible because I didn't want to see his face. 6 months after my first divorce proposal, my mother-in-law came again. That day was a weekend, but due to shift scheduling, Patrick was home. I was working from home and was a little busy. I thought I'd greet her briefly and then continue my work if she came just to see Patrick. However, when I showed my face to greet her, my mother-in-law suddenly pointed at me and started yelling.
What do you think you're doing to my Patrick?
What are you talking about?
You're treating him coldly because his earnings are low, aren't you? My son earns $2,500 a month, yet you who only about $1,500, why are you blaming Patrick?
When I stared at Patrick, he was sweating and his eyes were darting around. It seems he told various lies when he was grumbling to his mother. Just like he lied to me before we got married, he now seems to be deceiving his mother.
My mother-in-law kept complaining to me, trying hard to protect Patrick.
To begin with, your job isn't a big deal, is it? Despite that, you don't give Patrick any pocket money, and I heard you're living a luxury life alone.
Huh, a luxury life. When I looked at Patrick again, he put his index finger over his mouth, indicating not to say anything. Seems like he is flustered and teary-eyed, likely due to being in a state of agitation. Although he lied while complaining, he didn't seem to expect his mother to storm in.
Well, that's right. It's terrible to put your husband down like that, right, Patrick?
The moment my mother-in-law looked at Patrick, he blurted out at me, "That's right. The good-for-nothing wife should leave." It didn't seem like his true feelings, as the moment my mother-in-law turned her face towards me, he made an apologetic gesture behind her. So I nodded and said something I didn't mean. "Understood, I will leave. A woman like me was too good for Patrick. I'm sorry."
I'm glad you understand, but you don't have to leave. From now on, just change your attitude towards Patrick.
Yes, I see. I will change.
I'll be watching to make sure you don't do anything back to Patrick again.
My mother-in-law left with a satisfied look. However, inside my heart, a feeling of sadness, emptiness, and indescribable sense of nihilism overwhelmed me. What was the point of all my sacrifices paying off Patrick's debts? The thought brought tears to my eyes. Even Patrick seemed flustered, seeing me cry.
Catherine, are you okay?
Do I look okay?
Sorry, really. I think my mom misunderstood because I sort of exaggerated the story. I think she'll be relieved if we can become a good couple from now on. Let's grow together, okay?
Sure, I still have work to do. Don't disturb me. I opened my laptop and instead of working, I began searching for law firms. I also tried asking online what I should do about my situation. Then various solutions appeared. I blame myself for not taking action until now. If I had known, I might have been able to divorce before being talked down to by my mother-in-law like that. But from now on, I won't be bossed around by Patrick. With that determination, I started preparing for a divorce. Since then, I continued my life as usual without showing any signs of anger to keep Patrick off guard. While Patrick was away, I had a moving company give me an estimate and choose a new place to live. I had been living in this cheap apartment to save up for a wedding, but for just $150 more, I could live in a nice condo. I don't plan on remarrying for a while, so I'm thinking of getting a pet. I'm sure a pet will be more comforting than being with Patrick. And finally, the long-awaited moving day arrived. I had been gradually sending my belongings to my new house, so the only things I needed the movers for were heavy furniture and appliances. I was frustrated with Patrick, who hadn't even noticed the lack of my belongings. As I was rushing around, Patrick approached me with a bewildered expression and spoke to me.
Is something going on?
I'm moving.
What? I didn't hear about this.
Because I didn't tell you. You don't need to worry. I'm moving out on my own.
Wait a minute. I don't understand.
You don't need to understand. It doesn't concern you. But I've already terminated the lease on this apartment, so you're going to need to find a new place to live. He seemed to finally understand and hugged me.
I'm sorry. This is because I lied, right? I won't lie anymore. Can you forgive me?
This isn't about forgiveness. You had the nerve to dump your debt on me and to lie about working at a major company and even lie to your own mother, making me out to be the bad guy. I can't stand being your wife anymore. I'll have a lawyer contact you. I want to have a divorce. He just stood there in a daze without a word to say. Then he went somewhere and started making a call. I wonder what he thinks will change by making a phone call now. What could he possibly want to do? 10 minutes later, his mother arrived. She seemed shocked as she watched the movers carrying out the furniture.
Catherine, what's going on?
I don't feel like explaining everything to her now. It seems that Patrick hasn't told his mother the truth, and I don't feel a need to explain it for him. I'm moving. I'm getting a divorce from your son, so you'll have to hear the rest from Patrick about his current job, his annual income, his debt. Once you hear everything, I would appreciate an apology.
What's going on? Even though it's all your fault, you're blaming Patrick. If you had shown some remorse, I was actually considering forgiving you. Wait a minute.
I ignored her and saw the movers finish loading. The only things left in the room are his belongings. I grabbed my things, opened the door, and said, "Patrick, you need to leave by the end of the month," and then I stepped outside. I started the car and saw Patrick and his mother trying to chase after me. There's no way they could catch up to a car on foot, and at the same time I saw them both stumble and fall. I couldn't help but laugh. After all the misery they've caused me,
Seeing them try to chase after me knowing they can't catch up and then fall over, I had to laugh. I feel like I've laughed for the first time in a while. From now on, I'll live for myself, that's what I think. Later, it seems that Patrick did explain everything to his mother as she called to apologize. I'm truly sorry. It's because I didn't listen to your side of the story that we ended up in this situation, and I feel really bad about it. I want to apologize. Could you please tell me your address? No, I don't want you to know where I live. I don't think it's all your fault. I also think that I should have told you the truth sooner. If you had told me sooner, you might not have had to divorce. I didn't tell you because I didn't think you would side with me. The best you could do was scold him a little and try to make us reconcile, right? Then her attitude changed and she snapped back. What? Just because I'm being submissive, you're getting cocky. Don't get carried away. A sigh. What was the purpose of calling me? If you're just going to deflect and shift blame, then there's no need for further discussion. Well then, goodbye. I hung up and blocked her number. After that, I contacted a lawyer and was able to get a divorce smoothly. As soon as I presented evidence that Patrick would not only fail to contribute to the household expenses, but also made me responsible for credit card payments, the divorce was quickly finalized with my husband being found at fault. In consideration of the burden I had shouldered all along, it was decided that there would be no division of assets and I would receive everything. Patrick should have been able to receive his share of the assets. However, it seems that his father, who had never been involved before, was furious with his son. He ordered that everything be handed over to me as compensation for the trouble caused. Aside from that, my father-in-law also reimbursed me for the amount I had paid on Patrick's behalf. I never thought I'd get it back because the couple's property becomes common property even if I paid for it. I can only appreciate the kindness of my father-in-law. And it seems that my mother-in-law also faced the wrath of my father-in-law. She has always favored and spoiled Patrick. It seems she was told to live with Patrick alone, and they started living together in a rundown apartment like the one I used to live in. Finally, she seemed to understand my stress, and the next time she called me from a public phone, she apologized while crying. I won't forgive her for this, but I want her to taste the pain of living with Patrick for a while. As for Patrick, it seems that he exceeded his card limit and his mother issued a card ban. His salary is also managed by his mother and his allowance has been reduced to $70 per month. However, he couldn't suddenly change his lifestyle and it seems that he borrowed money from consumer finance and fell into even deeper debt. I heard that even his mother is starting to give up on Patrick. I sympathize with the lender. Since moving to a pet-friendly condo, I welcomed a cute dog into my life. The dog listens to what I say well, runs around energetically when we go for a walk, and it's good exercise for me. It's as if I've gained a younger brother and my life has become richer all at once. My parents started visiting my condo to meet the dog, and I made friends through my dog, and every day is more fulfilling than I could have imagined when I was married. For now, I want to continue enjoying these pleasant days.
My name is Emily, and I'm a 28-year-old single woman. I don't work for any company and live at home with my mother and my older sister, Catherine, who is 2 years older than me. Because of this, my family often refers to me as an unemployed trash in my late 20s. At 28, I'm confined to my room. Hey, unemployed trash, pay this month's rent. The person banging on the door and raising her voice is my sister. After graduating from high school, Catherine got a job at a local company. However, she quit. She claimed it was due to terrible juniors, but according to the rumors, it seems she was the one bullying the juniors, and that became a problem. Now, she sometimes takes up short-term part-time jobs. In other words, she's a part-timer. Catherine often says, "Even though I only work part-time, at least I'm working. You're the unemployed trash who isn't. That means you're the lowest in this house." And that's how she refers to me as an unemployed trash. By the way, I'm not very good at interacting with people. The reason dates back to my school days. When I was in elementary and middle school, I was often compared to my sister, who's only 2 years older than me. Catherine was the flashy, sociable type, and even her classmates would joke around asking me things like, "Are you really Catherine's younger sister?" It wasn't just because I was more reserved compared to Catherine that these things happened. Catherine loved to tease me by labeling me as a failure, and she would spread rumors about me to her classmates. She was talking to bugs in our garden, or she locks herself in her room and reads strange books all the time, probably the kind that nerds read. She spread stories about me, both true and false. I believe I wouldn't have been so introverted if it weren't for Catherine. Because of Catherine's rumors and influence, I was gradually labeled as a nerd or geek, and eventually I began to fit those labels. I started avoiding kids at school. I didn't join any clubs. I never hung out with friends, and as soon as classes ended, I'd rush straight home. The time before Catherine came home was the only time I felt at peace because I knew I'd be teased again when she returned. I had hobbies, so I'd immerse myself in them to escape reality. My mother would scold me for that behavior. "If you continue like this, you won't be able to make it in society." That was my mother's favorite phrase. And her next line would always be, "You should take Catherine as an example." I couldn't possibly emulate Catherine, who cornered me nearly every day. By the way, my mother was a stay-at-home mom and had never worked in society. My mother divorced my father when I was still very young. When my father was around, my mother, Catherine, and I had a better relationship than we do now. However, after the divorce, both of them began directing their negative emotions towards me. It seemed the reason was that I resembled my father. My mother doted on Catherine, who resembled her. She would throw away things I bought with my saved allowance, while Catherine would get expensive birthday gifts, and I'd just receive candy. Both my mother and Catherine would say, "Everything we do is for Emily's sake. We're just trying to encourage her to be a brighter child." But to me, they were merely justifying their actions. In reality, it was not my mother but my father who earned the money for our living expenses and money to raise us children. Even though he no longer lived with us, he made sure to transfer enough money so that Catherine and I didn't struggle financially. I contacted my father secretly without letting my mother know. My father and I kept in touch occasionally. When it came time to choose a high school, he told me,
"Go to the school you want, Emily. I'll pay for it."
He seemed to have persuaded my mother later on. Thanks to him, I was able to attend the high school I wanted, but my mother became even stricter with me, seemingly displeased that I had gone through my father. She would complain loudly enough for me to hear, saying things like, "It's tough having an incompetent daughter," or "It's strange how Catherine is so responsible." Over time, I had mostly stopped talking to my mother about myself or my future. Based on past experiences of being dismissed, I believed it would be futile to share, and I decided it would be better to handle things on my own. My mother held a grudge because I had once tattled to my father, and her response was merely, "Once you turn 18, do whatever you want." Thus, as time passed with my mother and Catherine unaware of what I was doing, both my sister and I grew up. Despite everything, I wished for reconciliation with my mother and Catherine. Our bond weakened due to the divorce, but I held on to the hope that even a small gesture could mend things. Every year, I picked out gifts and celebrated Catherine's birthday.
"What's this? Such poor taste."
Sometimes Catherine would say things like that to me. I tried cooking meals in the kitchen. However, my mother told me, "This isn't edible. Don't do it again." No matter what I did, I couldn't improve my relationship with the two of them. This went on for many years, and I began eating out more often.
"How can you afford such luxuries? Where are you getting the money?"
Although my mother scolded me this way, I dodged her questions by saying, "I have a part-time job." After turning 22, I started paying rent. My father's financial support ended, Catherine quit her job, and both she and my mother had no income. Their harassment intensified, perhaps due to financial insecurity, and I began being charged $500 a month for rent and food expenses. Catherine, on the other hand, wasn't paying anything. While it's true she used a room in the house, we never ate together and lived separately under the same roof. Still, I decided to pay. I thought, my family is in trouble. I have to help. However, I was shocked to discover something. Apart from me, my mother was asking her own parents for a monthly allowance of $4,000. I was close with my grandparents, so they consulted with me about the allowance. I was shocked to discover that my mother was demanding such a large sum every month. My grandparents are elderly and not working anymore. There's no way they could afford to pay that amount monthly. I asked my grandparents to send the $4,000 I'd give them to my mother on my behalf. I then apologized for burdening them with my mother's demands. While my grandparents looked apologetic, they told me, "Don't worry about the money." There's a reason I chose not to give the money directly to my mother. I feared she would take advantage if she knew I had money. I hoped that with Catherine finding a new job and the financial concerns being alleviated, they'd return to how they once were. Holding on to that hope, I continued to pay a total of $4,500.
By the way, Mom and I are moving to a new apartment soon.
My mother was smirking on the side. Which new apartment? I hesitantly asked. What Catherine proudly presented was a brochure of a luxury high-rise apartment.
Here, it's amazing, isn't it?
The location, amenities, and view were indeed top-notch. It was amazing, but I couldn't comprehend who was going to pay for it or why they were moving there. After all, Catherine works part-time jobs. As I was staring at the brochure lost in thought, Catherine mentioned,
"I might let you live there too."
"Me too?"
"You're an unemployed trash who can't do anything without us, right? If you really insist, I'm saying I might let you live there."
"What will happen to this house?"
"We'll start the selling process and put it on the market within a month."
Setting aside Catherine's annoying comments, I had been feeling that our current house was a bit cramped. It might still sell, but it's a bit old. Whether the condo Catherine showed was worth the price needed to be evaluated, but the idea of acquiring a high-value property now did cross my mind. I decided to consult with a friend knowledgeable about real estate investments about the condo. He's a friend from my student days. His comment,
"I think it's a decent property,"
became the deciding factor for me. Later on, I informed my mother and Catherine. "I'm thinking of moving into the condo." My mother and Catherine exchanged glances and smirked. They must have been thrilled, as from the beginning they had probably intended for me to pay the rent.
"Then we need to start the paperwork immediately,"
my mother said cheerfully.
"You, the shut-in, can use this as practice to go out. Go handle it,"
Catherine said to me. I had planned to go anyway, so I didn't retort. I immediately contacted the real estate agency, went to their office, and proceeded with the purchase, not the rent. When I returned home and informed them that I've completed the procedures, both my mother or Catherine cheered out loud. I hurriedly headed to my room to escape the noisy pair. A few days before the scheduled moving day, there was a note on the boxes containing my belongings reading, "No need to transport." Hey, what's this about? I asked my mother and Catherine. They had finished their preparations and were leisurely drinking tea.
It's your stuff, right? It's something off?"
Catherine pretended not to understand on purpose. "Oh, we're moving tomorrow, right?"
"What are you talking about? Only Mom and I are moving to the condo. Plus, we've decided to sell this house. You need to leave ASAP."
"We're leaving you behind because you're bad luck. Realize you can't be unemployed forever. Stand on your own 2 feet." My mother also made some nasty remarks.
"I see."
I simply responded and returned to my room. On the moving day, my mother and Catherine's belongings were being rapidly taken out. They were very excited and bragged to the movers. "We're moving to a condo. The night view is amazing." Of course, they completely ignored me. I stayed in my room focusing on my own work. A few hours later, I was bombarded with calls from my mother and Catherine. "Hello?"
"Hey, unemployed trash. What's going on? They told us the contract isn't set up." "Emily, didn't you handle the paperwork? I thought you could at least manage that, you useless piece of junk."
The shouting was so loud I instinctively moved the phone away from my ear. Well, I did expect something like this. I did handle the paperwork.
"What do you mean? They told us we aren't the current leaseholders."
Catherine's voice was high-pitched and piercing. "I did handle it. I didn't rent, I bought it. But since only Mom and you were supposed to live there, I sold it."
"Bought? Sold?"
"That's right. The day they told me I couldn't move with them, I sold the apartment. It was a bit of a hassle, but I didn't want to pay for a home that only they would live in." It sounded like the two were arguing over the phone. I said to them, "Why don't the two of you just renegotiate the contract?" My naive sister suggested.
"Right, Mom. Let's just contract it again for us. We can make Emily pay us back later." "Yes, let's do that."
It seemed Mother agreed. The phone abruptly hung up. A few hours later, the phone rang again with Catherine's shrill voice.
"You schemed something, didn't you?"
"What are you talking about?"
"They said we can't sign a contract."
I figured as much. I asked them, "You can't? Why?"
"I don't know. They said something technical. Something about not having enough credit or something."
Catherine isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. She probably doesn't understand the term credit. That means they don't trust you to sign a contract. I explained slowly as teaching to kids.
"What? I don't get this credibility thing."
That means they don't trust you to sign a contract. It's about social credibility. You often claim to be a part-timer but barely work, making you pretty much an unemployed trash. They won't lease to someone like that.
"Why could you, an unemployed trash, sign it and not me? Something's fishy. You must have rigged something."
This conversation was getting nowhere. I decided it was time to explain clearly why I was able to purchase the apartment. "Listen, Catherine, and Mom, are you listening too? You remember I went to an art school? Despite Mom being against it because it was far away, I've always been drawing, and I won a national competition in high school. My achievements were recognized, and I got a scholarship to attend the famous art university. Neither of you knew, did you? I never told you guys. I'm still drawing, using Dad's room for it. The monthly rent of $4,000 might seem high, but I felt it was okay given the hassle of moving. Oh, I'll send you the link to my portfolio website." I sent the link of my creator profile to both Catherine's and Mom's phones. This site showcased my achievements and past works. There's also a contact form for potential buyers of my artwork. I'm not an unemployed trash. I've been investing my income as well. I think my annual income is on par with business owners. My income is leagues ahead of yours, Catherine, who claims to be a part-timer. That's why I have credibility."
"What? You're lying. Stop making things up."
Catherine's voice was faint and incredulous.
"Art university? Artworks?"
I could faintly hear my mother's voice. I've never been particularly good at interacting with people. However, I've always had a keen interest in art and paintings. I started to find joy in drawing objects around the house, replicating plants and copying insects. The art book that my father secretly bought for me on my birthday is a treasured item. To my unsophisticated sister, Catherine, it probably looked like something a nerd would read. Being a successful artist, I, of course, don't work for a company. To my mother and Catherine, I probably appeared as an unemployed recluse, an unemployed trash. After all, they've never shown any interest in me before. They have no clue about the real me.
I don't know or care if you're some great person, but I won't forgive you for betraying Mom and me.
I was even impressed that they could pick a fight at this moment. You're selling the house within this month, right?
What?
Selling it. That's what you and Catherine decided, right? To kick me out. I could tell over the phone that both my mother and Catherine was speechless. I've already moved, as told, to one of the apartments I had invested in. I heard my mother and Catherine starting to panic on the other end, saying things like,
"This is bad. We have to cancel the sale."
After they removed their belongings, I had another moving company take out the rest. I'm already relaxing in my new place. Sipping my coffee, I remarked, "Looks like you two might end up homeless. Hope you can cancel the sale in time."
"How much more will you mock your family to feel satisfied?"
Hearing her say that for the first time, I shouted back in anger. That's my line. I don't expect them to understand how I've felt all these years being treated as the lowest in the family. I don't want to feel sorry for myself. There are so many things I couldn't do because of Catherine, many things I resented her for, but I believe the path I chose was right. Through art, I've made many friends and acquaintances. And then, I'm engaged. I'll be living in my new home with my fiancé, so there's no room for you two. Please enjoy living without the nuisances, I declared and hung up.
Are you okay?
The one cautiously asking from behind was my husband. He seemed surprised because I rarely raise my voice. Yeah, I'm fine. They're like parasites, so they'll figure things out even without me. I've given up on my sister in her 30s who's jobless, and my mother in her 40s who's the same. They somehow managed to cancel the sale of the house and moved back in. I lost all reasons and the willingness to pay them rent or the $4,000, so I stopped all financial support. It seems my penniless mother turned to my grandparents again.
"Emily did something terrible. She's the worst. It's all because of her that we don't have money."
That's what she seemed to have claimed. She probably thought things would work out if she just acted spoiled as always. However, my grandparents were furious when they heard the whole story from me.
Shameless.
"The one who's truly awful is you, isn't it? How could you treat Emily like that all these years? Mocking her, demanding her money, treating her like a nuisance. Unbelievable. You deserve to be abandoned."
My mother lost trust even from her own relatives. Catherine tried to get a job again, but it seems she's struggling. It had been years since she last worked. She occasionally called me.
"Emily, I realize I was wrong too. Let's put that behind us. Can you introduce me to a job or maybe a man who can be my husband?"
I was wrong too. What does she mean by I was wrong too? As expected, Catherine never changes. Asking for a job is one thing, but including a husband in the mix? She's clearly looking to leech off someone. Sorry, I don't think I know of any jobs or men that would be a match for you. Meaning she's too much to handle.
"Oh, well, let me know if you find any."
Does Catherine think a prince will come to whisk her away? She's already 30, yet still so immature. In this respect, Catherine and my mother are so alike. The reason my mother divorced my father was because she solely depended on his income without doing anything herself. My father, having a job with frequent overseas assignments, found it challenging to raise children, so he had no choice but to entrust their custody to my mother. He told my mother to raise us properly since he was providing ample child support. As a result, while my mother doted on Catherine, it seemed she grew to resent me, who took after my father. And now, even I have turned my back on my mother. If Catherine ever gets married, I can already foresee a similar future for her. I'm glad. I couldn't help but let those words slip.
About what?
My husband asks. That I didn't turn out like Catherine. With a kind husband and a fulfilling life and job, I have things that neither my mother nor Catherine possess, especially considering I grew up being treated poorly by both of them.